Hi, and welcome to this tutorial where we will install the Kirby Podcaster plugin. So as you may see on my screen, I'm using the Kirby Starter Kit. But feel free to use the plain kit, or if you already have an installation, simply use that one. The steps should be nearly the same and hopefully pretty straightforward. So at the end of this tutorial, we will have an RSS feed you can submit to the directories. We will have a listing on your website. We will have your first published episode, and we will do some configuration so that the website player will fit your design. And we will also configure the podcaster analytics so that you can see how many people are listening to your podcast. So I would say, grab yourself a Club Mate and let's start. Okay, so let's get started. So of course the first thing is to install the plugin itself. And as you can see, I'm on GitHub right now. And probably when you're looking at the GitHub repository of this plugin, it will look a bit different because I am filming this tutorial before the big major release. So this all looks a bit different maybe than at the time when you're looking at this repository. But the steps are the same. Simply scroll down a bit to the README file and you will see two possibilities to install this plugin. The first possibility, which if you already use Composer, I would highly recommend, is use the Composer command, simply copy and paste the command here and everything will be installed at the right place and you have nothing more to do. If you don't want to do that because you don't use Composer or you just want to test around and use the zip file for now, you can also do that. Simply click on the latest release and it will download the latest version for you. Unzip the zip file and put the content of the unzip folder into Site Plugins Podcaster. So be aware, if you have a plain installation and you haven't installed any plugins before, the plugins folder won't exist. So you have to create that first. So go into Site, simply create a new folder named Plugins, and then copy and paste the podcaster folder you got from the zip file. And that's it. That's basically all you need to do to install the plugin. And we can continue to start to configure everything. So let's go. Okay, so the installation is done and we can start configure everything. So I'm using VS Code for this tutorial. You can use any IDE or even use Vim in the terminal if you like. Your choice. We will start simply by looking if everything is there. As you can see, I'm using the starter kit here. Everything is there. And as you can see here, there's the plugins folder and in there the podcaster plugin folder. So we are set up in the IDE right now. And we'll start by configuring the heart of our podcast, which is the RSS feed. So, and for that, we will head over to the panel. And as you can see on my screen, on the left side, there's the Kirby panel. On the right side, there is the website. So right now the Kirby panel is split into three sections. We have the photography section, we have the notes over here, and we have the pages. And before we will create anything in the panel, we have to think about the structure we want for our podcast. So basically there are three options which are useful. The first one is you have a page for your podcast and in there all your episodes. So if you produce a lot of episodes, that may not be the smartest solution because, well, there will be a lot of pages in there and it might be a bit confusing. So what I prefer is method 2, which is split your podcast into seasons. So you have a podcast folder, the podcast page, which is your main directory. And in there you will have the RSS feed. And for every season you have a page with a listing in there. And within the season folder, you will have all your episodes for that season. I prefer this because I can simply head over, choose the season and create or edit an episode in there. And of course, there's the third option. You could also do something like split your podcast into years if you like to. So have a main folder for your podcast with an RSS feed in there and then simply have folders for each year. So it's your turn to decide what version you prefer. I would prefer the second one with the seasons, but it's up to you. Okay, let's start with the first step. We want to create our RSS feed, and we don't want to have it on the top level here. We want to have a page for our podcast, and in there we want to have a new subpage for the RSS feed, and in my case also for all the seasons. So if I want to create a page here in the starter kit, you can see I can type in a title, but I can only create a simple page, and this isn't what I want to do. Because the podcast top page should be some sort of listing, because it on the website later on, when we click over here on podcast, it should list all the episodes, right? And so for that, we need something which can do that. So we need a new template, and we need a blueprint for that. This is a part which doesn't come with the Podcaster plugin because it's highly individual. It depends on your theme and on your website structure, and if you already have something for listings. So this isn't part of the Podcaster plugin, so we have to switch over to our IDE and create two files, the blueprint and the template. Let's go. Okay, so first thing in the IDE is I think we will start with the blueprint, because for now we want to keep things within the panel. So we don't need a template for now. Later on we will also do the template part. But for now, let's just start by creating some blueprints. So within here, in the starter kit at least, and you will have a similar structure, I guess, you will find blueprint for pages. And we will steal a little bit, and because we want to have a listing, you will do something like it's done in, for example, the notes template. So let's start by creating a new file, which we will call, I simply call it listing YAML. And please be aware, I'm in this tutorial doing the bare minimum for all the stuff which isn't related to the Podcaster plugin. So I will create a listing blueprint right now, and it will be very simple, and it will fulfill our basic needs. And you probably can do things better and should do things other than I will do here. So I won't split it up into sections and fields and stuff like that. Feel free to do so if you want to. As I said, this is the bare minimum we need to get things up and running in the panel. So please be aware of that. Okay, let's start. We have our listing YAML here. First thing is we want some title for our blueprint. So let's simply call it listing, because it will only be there for listings. So, and we will split it into some columns. And just for you to know, if you see this recommendations here, this is a GitHub Copilot. So AI is with us. So be nice to it, or in some years it will be not so nice to us. Okay. So jokes aside. Okay, I will simply do this one and just keep stuff, a bit of it at least. And because I don't want to use this part, we don't want to extend anything. We don't have anything we can extend. So we will have three parts here. We want to have a listing for drafts. We want to have a listing for unlisted pages, which will host our RSS feed later on. And we will have a listed section, which will host our season data or episodes. So what we'll need is a type of pages, because we want to list all pages, all type pages in here. And these are drafts, and have the status draft, and let us sort them by, no, that's wrong. I wanted to do right. Sort by. sort by, and we want to sort them by date. I like that. So I can be a professional and copy and paste most of the stuff over here, because we want the sorting the same for everything. And let's keep it simple. We will also use a simple listing, no card listing for now. So we will save that. And for now, this will be enough. Let's head over to the panel and see if we already can see our new template. So we have to do some reload here and add a new page. And oh, it's not there. So because of how the starter kit works, we have to tell it that there's a new blueprint it can use. So let's go back to VS Code and look where we have to edit it. So because we are on the top level of the panel and we want to add a page here with our template, we have to edit the site YAML. And as you can see, please ignore the red scribbly lines. I don't have the right formatter installed. That's because it's all red. Please ignore that. As you can see here, we have the pages section, and it can host 3 templates right now. The About template, the Home, and the Default template, which is none of what we want now. We want our listing template in there. So we have to do 2 things. We have to add our listing template here. And because we want to create a new page, not only with the default template, but our listing template, we have to add it in here too. So now if I head back to the panel and do the things we love the most, do a reload and add a new page, you can see we have, this isn't disabled anymore, and we can change that to our new listing template. Fine, great, that's what we wanted. So let's call it my podcast, because this will be the main folder for our podcast. And I'm very creative with names. So let's create a new draft. And as you can see, this is what we put in our blueprint. We have the drafts, we have the unlisted, which is called in review right now, and we have the published pages. Of course, there are no pages in there. So let's start by extending it. The first thing is I don't want it to be called in review, because that's not what it is. Let's simply call it unlisted, because it will also host our RSS feed later on. Okay, before we change anything more in here, let's switch to the panel really short and see what happens if we want to create a new draft. So we can hand in our title as before. And now you can see in the template sections below here, we have all the available templates, right? And we don't want that, because this list can be really long. If you have an existing site with a lot of own blueprints, I guess this list can be pretty long. And we just want to see what we need in here. So let's head over to our blueprint and change that. So for now, we want to be able to create, if I am able to write that correctly, create pages of 3 types. So imagine our structure. We have our podcast folder, which we just created, our podcast page. And within that page, we want to have some subpages for our RSS feed and for our seasons. And for our seasons, we will simply use the same blueprint here, simply use the listing blueprint. So we will add this as an option to create a new page with a listing template. And if we look ahead in the future and we are in a season listing, we will also create our episodes in there, right? So for our episode, we will need a blueprint too. We won't create that right now, but let's already add it to the listing here, so we don't have to care about that later on. So if I save that and hit reload and create a new page, you can see we have now the possibility to create a new listing or to create an episode. Fine. We don't want to do anything of that. So why did I tell you that? Because there's a third type of blueprint we want to add. So, and this blueprint, we don't have to create it by ourselves because it comes with the Podcaster plugin. And it's called Podcaster Feed. And if I want to add a new page now, you can see we have the option to add a new feed. So, we are with the name again, right? Let's be really creative and call it feed. Wow, I'm peak creative right now. Create a new draft. Okay, so this is where we will do most of our podcast settings. We can configure our RSS feed here, the player, anything else. So as you can see, there are some fields with some red border around because this have to be filled. These are the least minimum fields we need to configure. So you see, again, we have to add a podcast title here. We did that before, but we did that for our listing and not for our RSS feed. So unfortunately, we have to repeat ourselves here and add our sophisticated podcast name in there. So let's, for now, do the minimum we have to do. Apple requires us now to add a copyright to every feed. So we will add a copyright in here. And because we want to be listed in the directories, we have to use those Apple categories. So let's have a look what we can do. And we are how are we doing? We're doing some technology stuff, I guess. Let's add that. We need at least one category has to be added. And our podcast has to have a language. So let's see, everything is in here. Let's simply choose English. Save that. So, and this is the minimum setting for our podcast. Okay, let's get a bit more into details. We gotta have some more feed settings. The most important one is this podcast ID, which is used later on for tracking analytics and stuff like that. Should be plain and simple, so let's name it my podcast right now. We need a link, which is used in the feed, podcaster plugin.com. And now we do have a problem because we need a source page. What is the source page? Well, remember we have 3 options or even more to structure our podcast, and I didn't want to make it fixed. So the plugin doesn't know where your episodes are. So we have to add a source page here, right? So the plugin knows where your episodes are. And as you can see, there's nothing we can choose of. Nothing where episodes are stored. So first thing we need to do is keep our structure in mind and create our first season. So again, in my podcast, which is our base for everything, remember, we will create a new listing. And this time we will call it Season 1. Listing, that's correct. Create draft. So within here, we will add all our episodes for the first season. We won't do that for now. Let's just publish this page. Head back over here. Head back out to our feed. Go to the settings. And we should now be able to select. No, we're not, because our podcast is a draft. Let's make it unlisted for now. We should be able to select it from here. Here is our podcast. We go in there and we select our first season, because in there all the episodes will be, and this is our source. So later on, when there are more seasons, we simply add them here. Save the changes. And now we should be able to have a first look at our RSS feed. Let's try. Okay. Simple. Not much information in there, but everything we need for a basic feed. So we have a title, some dates, the link we just entered, our language is set, our copyright is there, our iTunes category is there, all the stuff we added to our feed is there. And now we can get to do some fine-tuning. All right. Let's see what we can do here. This tab, for now, we won't do anything in here. We'll go into the show details, and I will tell you some more stuff you can do here. So most of the stuff should be pretty obvious. We can add some more information to our podcast. For example, a great podcast about getkirby.com. And we can add some more information in here, so the listeners know what this show is about. So be more detailed if you want. Let's add some Apple keywords here. Let's say it's about Kirby CMS. Okay, for now. We could add more categories here if you want to. We can also change how our podcast is listed. It can be a serial podcast or episodic, which we have seasons, so it might be a good idea to add it as a serial podcast here. Okay, last thing we're gonna do here is add our cover image. So simply grab some image and drag it over here. And here we go. So let's have a look at the settings here again. I just want to show you some more fields, which are the ones below here, where you can set some special settings, let's name it that way. For example, you can set your whole podcast to explicit, so then it's only available for people with age verification and 18 plus, I think. You can block your podcast, so it will be wiped from the directories. You can mark your podcast as complete, which will tell the directories there won't be any new episodes. And you can add a new feed URL. I don't know if every podcatcher can handle this, but for example, if you want to change your feed URL and move it anywhere else, you can enter this new feed URL there. And the next time the podcatchers read your RSS file and see this new feed URL in the future, hopefully they will grab the new URL and get the data from there. So this is a one-time setting. And you should only use it if you really want to move your podcast feed URL. So, and with that, we have our RSS feed, and the only thing which is missing are episodes, right? So let's try to add some episodes. Okay, we are back in VS Code, and we want to create our episode blueprint. So let's create a new page blueprint called episode YAML. You may remember in the listing we already added it here, so we don't have to do anything else. And in this blueprint we want to add some stuff. So first of all, we need a title for that. Let's call it episode. And I will do some copy and paste here because I'm lazy. And I want our episode to be numbered by date. And now we need to add some tabs, because the Podcaster plugin comes with a tab for your episode, which contains all the fields you need for your RSS feed. So let's configure some tabs. And by the way, if you already have a blog or something similar, you might be able to use that blueprint for your posts, right? You just simply extend it for the podcast and add the tab, for example. You then have to, of course, change it here to the template name of your blog post, for example. So we don't have anything like that. We start from scratch and we do the bare minimum here again. We simply want it to work and can add some more details later. Okay, so we add some tabs because the Podcaster plugin comes with a tab with all the stuff you need for the RSS feed. So our podcast extends not tabs podcast, but podcaster episode, right? That. And we need another tab for our content stuff with some sections of the type. Now we need a name for the section. So basic stuff. And we need some fields in there. So if you never wrote a blueprint, I won't get into details here, right? So there's a very good documentation on the Kirby site. Please have a look at it because it would be too much to explain how all those blueprints work. So I assume you already wrote some sort of blueprint. And if you haven't, it isn't that hard. Basically, we need some fields and the tabs, and you will see what we do here. I show you in a minute. So let's add some basic fields we need. We need a date field. So label date, magic, yeah, AI magic. Sounds good to me, looks good to me. Let's add some text because maybe for the website we want to tag. We don't need that if we don't want to. I will add it. I don't know if I'm going to use it later on. And it's label text area is fine. Required, no. Buttons, we can skip that. Looks good to me. Let's keep it that way. And now we should be able, when we head to our panel and go into our first season, to add a draft and add a new episode. Here we go. Let's call it first episode. Create a new draft. Here we go. And as you can see, a lot of stuff is in there. We didn't configure it. Everything comes from the Podcaster plugin. So let's have a look what we need. Most important, we need an audio file for our episode. So this is a must-have field. And I think somewhere on my cluttered desktop, I put an audio file I can use here. And again, as we did with the cover before, we can simply drag and drop files over here. And here we go. So just a quick note for somebody switching from the version 2 of the plugin to version 3. There was another method for adding files, which is below here. These are for backwards compatibility. If you're starting new from scratch, simply ignore these fields. Use the ones above here. If you already use Podcaster plugin version 2 and want to switch, I highly recommend to move the stuff from above here, from below here to over here. You don't have to. I made it compatible, but I would recommend it. So, simple note for existing users. So, next to the episode, you could also upload a cover image, which isn't recommended by Apple. If you want a special cover for every episode, you should add it to the ID3 data of your MP3 file. That's the way you should go. If you cannot do that for some reason, you can upload it here. It will be in the feed and it will work, but it's not recommended by Apple and all the other platforms. So let's fill in some more details. So maybe you can remember we set our podcast to a serial podcast, so we can add some data here, which is we're in the first season and this is our first episode and it's a regular episode. You could also add a trailer or if you have some bonus material here. So it's a regular episode we're doing here. And you see those two fields, which may be familiar because we set them for the whole podcast before. You could also set them for each episode. So if you normally don't have any explicit episodes but have a guest which is talking weird shit, you could take this and make the one episode explicit. So, or you can even block one single episode. We can add an episode title for the feed. This is not the title of the page for your website. Most of the time it will be the same, but it could be different. We can add a subtitle here. And again, we can add some description for that episode. If you can add some chapters here. Let's say first. You can add a timestamp, let's say minute 2, 30 seconds. Something great happens. You could add an URL or even an image. From our content tab, we can add a date, which is set by default. We could add some more text if we want to for our website. We don't care about that right now. Important part is we have all the fields needed for our first episode and we can publish it. Let's see what happens. So, episode published. Now, if we head over to our RSS feed and have a look at it, you can see here, there's our first episode in our feed. And if we are fine with that and we don't need a website and we don't want our podcast to be visible on our website, that's it. We could go ahead and simply publish our RSS feed and hand over the URL to Apple, Spotify, all the other services out there. And we're set. Congratulations, you just published your first episode. And in some days, your podcast will be available in all major podcatchers. Cool. Okay, stop. Before we just publish everything to the directories, we should do a simple test, don't we? Okay, so first thing, let's publish our feed. I will put it to unlisted here. I will open the feed again. And in our first item here, you'll see this enclosure URL, which is the MP3 file we uploaded with a special download trigger path there. So let's copy the URL, open a new tab, and see if it works. Hi, this is the Kirby Podcaster Plugin. You're listening to a sample MP3 file used for testing purposes. Lovely, it works. We're set. So now we can go and publish our RSS feed and submit it to Apple and all the other podcatchers out there. And then we're live. We can run our podcast. Congratulations, you're done. Oh, wait. Maybe you want to know how many people are listening to your podcast. Okay, let's start configuring Podcaster Analytics. Okay, let's be honest. Bad news. Podcaster Analytics needs a database, so we won't be able to simply use Markdown for that, because we will save a lot of data, and Markdown isn't the right place for such amount and such a structure of data. So, unfortunately, when we want to use Podcaster Analytics, we cannot simply do that with a file system, approach. Well, sort of, yes, but we need a database. And we have two options for that. You can use MySQL or SQLite. And I would recommend using SQLite because it's there when you're using a modern PHP installation. And it's sort of file-based too, if you wonder. So let's start and configure our Podcaster Analytics. So let's switch over to VS Code again. And this time we don't need any blueprints or stuff like that. We need some configuration. So let's head over to the config file. So, and we have to add some configuration to our config file here. So first of all, let's get rid of this. We don't need that right now. Okay, what we want to do is we want to tell the Podcaster plugin which type of database it should use. And we said we want to use SQLite. So let's start configuring Podcaster. We need to call it that way, Podcaster. And then it's called stats type. And it's not Podlove. It's definitely SQLite. So this won't do anything. We first have to enable statistics before we do anything else. So again, we will do Podcaster, and then it's called stats internal, and we will set that to true. Why is it called stats internal? Because you are able in the panel to do some additional external tracking, like using Matomo or PodTrack. Those are not that detailed. You can do that, but I would recommend using the internal tracking. Okay. So we told the plugin that we want internal stats, and we told them that we want SQLite for that. So, and I already think this isn't looking very, very good here, right? We will have so many lines, and it's always with the prefix stuff here. So let's right away start doing that in a cleaner approach. And we will do this here. Podcaster, and that's it. Let's do it that way. And this is an array. And now we can simply grab those two, put them in here. It looks a bit more organized, right? So we need one more setting. We need to tell the plugin where to store the SQLite file. So this is up to you. You could put it anywhere. It's probably good to put it into content. Maybe you already have some sort of backup strategy for your content folder. Maybe a good idea to put it in there. Maybe you have your custom folder set up and you have some storage folder or things like that. Be sure to put it anywhere where it isn't wiped or deleted or cleaned up or whatever. It should be always there, and it should be backupped if it's possible. So let's start setting it up. Okay, so let's add the path in here. It's called SQLite path, and we don't want the full file name. We simply want the folder name, which is in our case content with a trailing slash. Let's see. So let's hop over to the panel, and you may remember that in the feed we have some tracking tab. And in the versions before this version, the analytics part would be in there. So with another tab for analytics. This isn't the case anymore. And within tracking, we simply can set some Matomo tracking or PodTrack, which you can do. I would still recommend using the internal tracking, which is way more detailed. So where has our tracking gone? It's in the main menu over here. Simply go to Podcasts. And here we are. Our podcast is selected. And obviously we didn't have any listeners right now. So what happened behind the scenes is that the database was initialized and set up, and we should see a file in the file system. So let's head over to VS Code right now. And I would assume that in our content folder, there's a Podcaster Lite file. Here it is. Perfect. So we're set up. You could do backups from it right now. And our internal tracking should work. We can do some more fine-tuning, and I would like to do that right now. Let me have a look how the options look, because I don't want all the bots to be in my analytics. So I will add do not track bots, set it to true, because when the Apple podcast bot comes and initializes your feed and looks if there are any changes, you don't want those requests to be part of your analytics. You just want those real requests by your listeners. So let's do not track bots. It's a good option, I think. Okay, one last thing we want to do. We want to check if the tracking is working. So let's go. It's simple to do. Let's go to our site, to our podcast, and open the feed again. Here we are. This should already trigger a hit on the feed download. And let's grab the URL again of our MP3 file. And you see it has this special path in here, the download path. You can configure that to be different. But basically this triggers the tracking of episode download. The same with the RSS feed, by the way. So let's copy the URL, open it in a new tab. Okay, we don't want to listen to it again. It works, and it should have triggered a download, right, in the analytics. So let's close this again. And if we go back to the podcast analytics, you see we have a download. Today, this week, this month, overall, 1 download, that was us, and no estimated subscribers. So how does that work? Basically, you cannot say how many subscribers your podcast has. Currently it's not possible. Some platforms like Apple or Spotify provide some more analytics. And there are a lot of services out there you can host your podcast on, which do some math, and that's what's done here too. So how does this work? So basically all of those services and this plugin too takes your episode and uses the first time span of your episode, and then calculates from the given downloads and the time span, and sees, okay, if it's downloaded X times during this time span, there are probably n amounts of subscribers. So it's math, it's an estimation. It will never be 100% correct, but it's a good over the thumb calculation to say around about there may be some subscribers of number X. And because we don't have enough data and there isn't enough time passed, there's this 0 there because we don't have enough data right now. But if you're using the plugin and if your podcast is online for some time and you had some listeners, this number will get higher and more accurate. And still it's an estimation, but give it some time and you will get a number which might be relatively accurate. So let's see what we have beside those numbers above here. We have some monthly stats split it into days, so you can see your downloads, all the downloads of the given day. And we have some user data here, which is our download. Obviously, we are on a computer right now. We don't use Google Chrome, but a Chromium browser. So that's the user agent. And we are on a Mac system. So when there are more listeners to your podcast, all the podcatchers will be listed here, and it will be more colorful, hopefully. So, and we have some episode details. Again, we don't have enough data right now. So if I click on it, you won't see much more than this blue dot. You will get a beautiful graph here, and you can even add more episodes here, and you can compare the episode. You can zoom in and get more details. And below here, you will get episode downloads from the very start of the podcast to right now. Again, you can also zoom in then here. You can even download it as a graphic or a CSV to put it in the spreadsheet. And the same with the feed. So you will get all the data you need to run your podcast. It's not personalized, so you don't have to fear that privacy issue. So that's not the case. No IP addresses are saved anywhere. It's just simple stats, anonymous, so no problem for if you care about privacy, which you should. But you get all the metrics you need to run your podcast and improve single shows and see how many listeners you have. It's nice to know, right? One thing is still missing in our setup, and this is the website part. We still don't show anything of our podcast on our website. So let's change that. Build some simple templates and show stuff on our website. Okay, so we will keep it very, very simple here. I won't do any design because I'm not good in it. I will simply list the pages, the episodes, and that's it. And then we will have a detail page where we have a player. So that's what we will do. And if you want some design, you have to do it on your own. I'm not good at this. So we have created 2 blueprints, and for that blueprints we need according templates. So let's start by creating a new template for our listing, calling it listing PHP. And we can go over here, let's go to the notes and see what snippets we have. Or basically 2 snippets, we can use those. Let's copy and paste and just remove all of this. No, we don't remove all of it. Let's remove this and this, and then we simply say podcast for now. So what do we want? We want to have a listing. I won't do anything special here, so keep it simple. What do we want? We want a listing, and basically I want in there something like this with a link to the page with the title of the podcast episode. That's it. So, but first somehow we have to get the episodes, right? So for that we can use again the help of the Podcaster plugin. Let's do some magic over here. No, I don't want any snippet. I just want some PHP code over here. So what do we want? We first need the RSS, because this functions as our base for everything. So let's grab our RSS feed we want to use here as a base. And it's called, well, my podcast feed. Let's have a look. It is, here it is, my podcast feed. That's what we want in here. So now we have the RSS page. And now we can use the podcast helper class and say, let's use podcast helper. We can name it any way you want. And add a new podcast class here. And now we can get all the articles, right? So episode list, call it that way. We use podcaster helper, and it's nearly right. We know we want all the episodes, and we hand in the RSS page. So now we have in there a list of all the published episodes. So we can go here and simply say episode list at episode. That's very nice of you. So we can get rid of this. And end the for each. And so what we do now is go through all those episodes, grab every single one, add the link to the a tag, and simply echo the title. That's it. That's all we want to do for now. If you want to do more sophisticated stuff, you can do it. You don't have to use the podcast class at all. You can also query it on your own. But it's easier to use this get episodes method because it cares about your structure, right? You don't have to think about how to get grandchildren and stuff like that at all. It simply does that for you. So if you like, use it. It makes your life way easier. So what we can do now, we can test it. We can go back to our panel, go to site, my podcast, and now we do have a template for that listing, right? So we should be able to open it. Let's see. Bam. So, okay, because we used the podcast class, obviously, it's marked red as a failure. So I could have guessed it, that we need some more stuff here. So, and it's not quite right. We need the correct namespace, podcast, this one. Here we go. So now we should be able to use it. Let's open it again. Ta-da! Here we are. Oh, isn't that beautiful? And as said, now we have a list of all our episodes. First episode, we only have one. And if we click on it, we go to the details. And what you see here now is the default template. So it might work for you as well already. Not for us, because we want to add some more stuff. Let's get to the episode template. Okay. So again, we need another template. Let's create one. We called our YAML, our blueprint YAML episode. So we create a template with the same name, episode PHP. And I will be lazy again. I will grab the default template, copy and paste. Let's head over to the site. Let's open it. Can do a reload. Should still be there. Wonderful. Let's see if it's the correct template. Works. So, okay. Basically, we can now use all the fields we have on the panel for the episode, right? The description, season, stuff like that. It's simple as adding some fields here, as you would do it with Kirby, and you know how it works probably. So let's simply add one idea what we can do. Let's say we want let's see, podcaster season, I think it is. Let's see if it works. Let's simply add a season information then. Here it is. So we can say this is season 1 episode. Come on, AI, do your work. Season 1, episode 1. Hey, works. Perfect. So, done, right? No. The most important part for this page, of course, is the player. And you have two options. You can use two sorts of player. The first one is a simple HTML5 audio player, which isn't styled at all. It's just that simple player. Or you can use the Podlove player, which is integrated into the Podcaster plugin, which is way more sophisticated, which has tabs and you can download files and you can subscribe to the podcast and all stuff like that. So we will have a look at both of them, but I will recommend using the Podlove player, which is, I think it's one of the best players out there for websites at least. So how do we do that? Well, basically there are 3 snippets for you. One for the HTML5 player and one for the Podlove player. And one which does all the magic for you. So let's see how it works. Let's go in here. Let's create another div. I don't know. We don't need all those divs, but why not? And we want to add a snippet here. Simple as that. Doing some copy and paste right now. So it's the Podcaster player. And I'll show you what it does in a minute. One thing you should note is that I'm handing in here the episode, which is important because you may want to use that player outside of an episode page. Maybe if you have on your front page, if you want to show the latest episode, you can simply add the player, hand in the episode page, and it will work anywhere on your website. So that's why we have to hand in that episode page. So let's see what happens if we reload the page. Here we go. And that's the Podlove player, right? And as you can see, we have already, it looks nice. We have the cover here, all the data we have handed in. And even here, you see, we created a chapter mark when we created the episode. Even the chapters are working. And you can subscribe, which is not configured yet. We will do that later on. But first, let me show you something, because that snippet can do both players. And I'll show you how you can do that. Let's head over to the panel. So let's have both side by side, the panel and the page. So what we can do now is, we are already here. We can go to the feed. And then go to website player. And by default, you see the Podlove player is set. But you can switch to the HTML5 player. Let's save and reload this page. And now you have the default HTML5 player. If you're fine with that, just go with that. So what we can do now is configure a lot of stuff. We can configure all the branding, like colors, things like that. I won't do that because, well, I'm not good at stuff like that. You can configure even fonts. You can also say, or let's get to that later. You can also configure the sharing. Well, let's save first because I want to show you the Podlove player again. Is some tabs here, which is the chapter tab and the download tab and the option to subscribe. So to be able to subscribe, you have to add clients which can subscribe. And you can select them here. So you can say, let's add Apple Podcasts. And for some of those services, you need the URL to your podcast on that service. For example, for Apple Podcast, you need to add that service URL, which is some Apple URL / your podcast ID. So unfortunately, I cannot show you that. So let's see if there is some podcast we don't need that for. I think Pocket Cast doesn't need a service. Let's add Pocket Cast and let it add another one. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know, Overcast doesn't need one, I think. You can look into the documentation of the Podcaster plugin. So let's save this and switch over to our page and see what happens here. So now if I click subscribe, you see, okay, Overcast probably needs a service URL. That's why it's not in here right now. But I could now subscribe with Pocket Cast. And of course, it doesn't work because we are on a local domain, it's not public. So we always have our feed URL, so every podcatcher can work with that feed URL, right? You can copy it and paste it into your podcatcher. So I cannot show you those subscription stuff because it's not public. We don't have those service URLs. And none of those services will be able to access our local host here right now. So sorry, cannot show you that. But I can show you another tab, which is the share tab. And now we can configure, Twitter. Do you remember Twitter? Back then when it was a thing. Probably have to change that before going public. So we can add all the things we want in our Share tab, and those come with the Podlove player, so we are limited to that. And okay, before I hit save, this is a nice feature. You can turn it on and off, which is share playtime. So when you want to share some quote in minute 2, you can just go to minute 2 here and hit share, and then it will jump to that position if somebody opens the link. And now you can see we have a Share tab over here. Click on it, and you have all the options we just configured. And you can say, let's share from the current position. And if you turn that off here in the panel, this won't show up. Cool. So as you can see, we can fairly easy configure the Podlove player or the HTML5 player, which doesn't have any options like that. So again, what did we realize with this tutorial? We have our working RSS feed. You can submit it to all the platforms. We have a seasonal structure for our podcast. You can add new episodes. We have the blueprint for the episodes. We configured analytics. You can see how many listeners you have. And we have a very rudimentary but working template system for your listing and for our single episode. So I guess it's a good foundation for everything you want to do. You can grab the information you got in this tutorial and go on with that, configure your podcast, make it beautiful, make it sound great. And if you want to, send me a message on Mastodon and with the URL of your podcast. I'm very curious what you're doing with my plugin. So if you would like, feel free to send me the URL of the podcast. I'd like to listen to what you're doing. And hopefully this tutorial was helpful for you. And hopefully everything is up and running and you can start fine-tune and go live with your podcast very soon. Good luck with that. And maybe we see you in another tutorial. See you then. Bye-bye.